I'm Jenny Parker, 47 years old, and 5 years ago, my entire world collapsed when my husband Marcus died in a car accident. The grief was unbearable, like someone had reached into my chest and torn out half my heart, leaving a wound that wouldn't stop me Parkerding. But what my sister Rachel did next was even worse. If you've ever trusted someone with your whole heart only to have them betray you when you needed them most, please let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to join others who understand this kind of pain. Marcus and I met at a used bookstore in downtown Portland on a rainy Saturday afternoon in 2008. I was reaching for a worn copy of Pablo Neruda's poetry when our hands touched on the spine. He had these warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and instead of the awkward dance of who should take the book, he simply said, "How about we read it together over coffee?" That was Marcus' direct, warm, unafraid of connection. We spent 4 hours in the cafe next door, him reading passages aloud in his terrible Spanish accent, while I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my lavender latte. He was a financial advisor who collected vintage typewriters and made the world's best chicken tikka masala from scratch. I was a pediatric nurse who couldn't keep a houseplant alive, but could calm any crying baby. We balanced each other perfectly. Those early years were a whirlwind of building our life together. We bought a 1920s craftsman house with good bones and terrible plumbing in the Hawthorne district. Every weekend was a new project. Stripping wallpaper, refinishing the original hardwood floors, Marcus teaching me how to use a drill while I taught him the proper way to fold fitted sheets. He'd wake up at 5:30 every morning to make us breakfast before our shifts, always leaving a sticky note on my coffee mug with a terrible pun. "What do you call a fake noodle?" "An impasta. Have a great day, my love." We had movie nights every Friday where we'd alternate picking films, his action thrillers for my period dramas. We were building something real, something lasting. My parents had died when I was in college, and Marcus's family lived across the country, so we became each other's everything. Our friends used to joke that we were sickeningly perfect together, but it wasn't perfection, it was choice. Every day we chose each other. By 2017, we'd hit our stride. Marcus had been promoted to senior partner at his firm, and I'd become the head nurse in the NICU. We'd paid off the house, traveled to 7 countries, and were talking seriously about adoption. Our days had a comfortable rhythm: morning coffee on the back porch, watching the hummingbirds, text messages throughout the day, sharing inside jokes, evening walks through the neighborhood with our rescue dog Fitzgerald, Sunday dinners with our chosen family of friends. We had investment accounts, retirement plans, life insurance policies, all the responsible adult things that seemed so important. Marcus handled most of our finances. He was brilliant with numbers and genuinely enjoyed spreadsheets in a way I never could understand. "Our future is secure, Vic," he'd say, showing me pie charts I pretended to comprehend. "No matter what happens, you'll always be taken care of." I trusted him completely. I trusted the life we'd built. Looking back, there were signs I should have noticed. My sister Rachel had started coming around more often that spring, which seemed sweet at the time. She'd been living in Seattle, working retail and dating a string of men who treated her poorly. When she said she was thinking of moving back to Portland, Marcus and I offered to help her get settled. She'd always been the baby of the family, the one who needed rescuing, and I'd been playing the role of protective older sister since our parents died. "Family takes care of family," I'd tell Marcus when he gently suggested that maybe Rachel needed to figure things out on her own. But there was something different about her visits that year. She asked a lot of questions about our finances, made comments about our fancy neighborhood, joked about being written into the will. Marcus noticed it too. "Why does she need to know how much the house is worth?" he asked one night after she'd spent dinner grilling us about property values. I brushed off his concerns. That was Rachel. Always a little too interested in money because she never had any. I couldn't see what was right in front of me. The morning of September 15, 2018, started like any other. Marcus kissed me goodbye at 6:45, promised to pick up Thai food for dinner, and reminded me that we had concert tickets for the weekend. "Love you more than coffee," he said. Our daily parting ritual. "Impossible," I replied like always. At 2:47 that afternoon, I was adjusting an IV for a premature baby when Dr. Patterson pulled me aside. The look on her face made my stomach drop before she even spoke. There had been an accident on Highway 26. A semi-truck had jackknifed in the rain. Marcus was being rushed to OHSU. The drive to the hospital was a blur of rain and sirens and prayers to a God I wasn't sure I believed in. By the time I arrived, he was gone. Just like that. 15 years of shared life ended on a random Tuesday afternoon. The last thing he'd said to me was about coffee. The next few hours were a haze of paperwork and phone calls and decisions no one should have to make. The hospital staff knew me, treated me gently, but I felt like I was floating outside my body, watching some other woman sign forms and nod at words like arrangements and personal effects. My hands shook so badly, I couldn't dial Rachel's number. A nurse, Amy, who I'd trained 5 years earlier, made the call for me. "Tell her I need her," I managed to whisper. "Tell her to come now." I sat in that family conference room, the one where I'd delivered bad news to other families dozens of times, clutching Marcus's wedding ring and wallet, waiting for my sister to arrive, waiting for someone, anyone, to tell me this was all a mistake. Rachel's response, when Amy reached her, should have been my first real warning. According to Amy, who told me this weeks later, Rachel's first question wasn't, "Is Jenny okay?" or "What happened?" It was, "How did he die?" Followed immediately by, "Was it his fault?" When Amy explained about the accident, that Marcus was gone, Rachel had asked about the funeral arrangements, and then said she was in the middle of something, but would try to come by later. Try to come by later. My husband was dead, my world was ending, and my only family would try to come by later. Amy, bless her, had been so shocked she'd asked Rachel to repeat herself. "Well, I mean, he's already gone, right? There's nothing I can do right now. Jenny's strong, she'll be fine until I can get there." Amy told me she'd wanted to reach through the phone and shake her. Instead, she'd said very quietly, "Your sister needs you now," and hung up. Rachel showed up at the hospital 3 hours later, reeking of perfume and bar smoke. "Oh, Vicky," she said, giving me a loose hug that felt more like an obligation than comfort. "This is so awful. Have you called the insurance company yet?" I stared at her, unable to process that question. Marcus's body was 3 floors below us, and she was asking about insurance. "What?" I managed. She shifted uncomfortably, playing with her phone. "I just mean, they need to be notified quickly. These things have time limits. Marcus would want you to be practical." Practical? My husband of 15 years was dead, and I needed to be practical. Behind her, Amy's face was a study in barely controlled anger. "Maybe," Amy said carefully, "we could focus on getting Jenny home safely first." Rachel waved her hand dismissively. Of course, I'm just trying to help. Someone has to think about these things." The funeral was a blur of flowers and casseroles and people saying meaningless things about God's plan. Rachel appointed herself as my handler, intercepting visitors and managing flowers, playing the part of the devoted sister. "Poor Jenny," I heard her tell my colleague Janet. "She's always been so dependent on Marcus. I don't know how she'll manage alone." The words stung, but I was too deep in grief to respond. She stayed at my house that week, supposedly taking care of me, but spent most of her time on her laptop and making hushed phone calls. When I asked who she was talking to, she said she was coordinating with her job for time off. "Family emergency," she said, as if Marcus's death was an inconvenience to her schedule. Our friends, our real family, circled around me with genuine love. Sarah and Tom took turns staying overnight. Linda walked Fitzgerald every day. James handled the funeral arrangements when I couldn't. They held me up when I couldn't stand. Rachel watched from the sidelines, occasionally performing grief when others were watching. 10 days after the funeral, when the house had finally emptied of well-meaning visitors, Rachel made her move. I was sitting on the couch, wearing one of Marcus's t-shirts and staring at nothing, when she sat down with a folder. "Vicky, we need to talk about practical matters," she said, her voice taking on a tone I recognized from childhood, the one she used when she was about to ask for money. "I've been looking into things, and there are a lot of decisions to make." I couldn't focus on her words. The folder had Marcus's handwriting on it. "Where did you get that?" I asked. She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "From Marcus's office. Someone has to handle these things, and you're clearly not in a state to do it." She opened the folder, revealing bank statements, insurance policies, investment accounts. "Did you know how much money Marcus had?" "I mean, you two had." The way she corrected herself was telling. "He was very thorough." "Rachel," I said slowly, "what are you doing?" She put on her concerned face, the one she'd perfected over years of getting out of trouble. "I'm trying to help you, Vicky. You're vulnerable right now. People will try to take advantage. As your only family, I need to protect you." She pulled out a document I didn't recognize. I've had a lawyer draw up some papers. Just to protect your assets during this difficult time, you'll make me temporary power of attorney, just until you're feeling more yourself. The words penetrated my grief fog like ice water. Power of attorney? She nodded eagerly. It's standard in these situations. That way I can handle all the complex financial stuff, while you focus on healing. Even in my shattered state, alarm bells were ringing. I think I need to talk to Marcus's lawyer first, I said. Her face darkened for just a moment before the mask slipped back on. Of course. But Vicky, every day we wait is potentially money lost. These accounts need immediate attention. That night, unable to spark up, I went through the folder Rachel had left on the coffee table. As I read through the documents, my documents from my house that she'd taken without asking, a sick feeling grew in my stomach. She'd highlighted every asset, made notes about property values, circled account balances. In the margins of our life insurance policy, she'd written "claim ASAP" and check for additional policies. On a sticky note attached to our investment portfolio, she'd calculated what we would have after taxes. As if Marcus's death had made her my financial partner, I found the power of attorney documents she'd had drawn up. They weren't temporary at all. They would give her complete control over every financial decision, every asset, every penny Marcus and I had saved. The lawyer's name seemed fake. The document itself looked like something downloaded from the internet, but it was the handwritten note at the bottom that broke through my grief. Vicky won't notice anything missing for months. Grief makes people stupid. I stared at those words, written in my sister's handwriting, until they blurred. Grief makes people stupid. Is that what she thought? That Marcus's death had made me too stupid to see what she was doing? The rage that flooded through me was the first thing I'd felt, besides numbness in days. I heard her in the guest room, talking on the phone again. No, she hasn't signed anything yet, she was saying. But she will. She's completely broken. Yeah, the house alone is worth at least $800K in this market. I know, right? Who knew being a financial advisor paid so well? Give me another week, maybe 2. I stood outside the door, shaking with fury and disbelief. My sister, my baby sister, who I'd protected and provided for after our parents died, was planning to steal from me while I grieved my husband. The betrayal cut almost as deep as the loss. The next morning, I confronted her. I found your notes, I said, placing the folder on the kitchen table between us. Grief makes people stupid? She had the audacity to look confused.
What notes?
Vicky, you're not making sense. Maybe you should rest more. Gaslighting. She was actually trying to gaslight me. The power of attorney forms, Rachel. The calculations about my assets. The phone call last night about how broken I am. Her face went through several expressions. Surprise, calculation, and finally defiance. You're being paranoid, she said coldly. This is the grief talking. You're not thinking clearly. I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised us both. No, Rachel. For the first time in days, I'm thinking very clearly. Get out of my house. She stood up, gathering her things with exaggerated movements. Fine. When you lose everything because you're too proud to accept help, don't come crying to me. I was only trying to protect you from yourself. After she left, I called Marcus's actual lawyer, Harold Brennan, who'd handled our wills. What he told me made my blood run cold. Rachel had already called his office twice, claiming to be acting on my behalf, trying to get information about Marcus's estate. She'd been turned away due to privacy laws, but Harold was concerned enough to document the attempts. I'm very glad you called, Jenny, he said gently. In my experience, grief can make people vulnerable to those who would take advantage, even family, especially family. I made an appointment to see him the next day, to understand exactly what Marcus had left and how to protect it. That night, alone, in our house that felt too big and too quiet, I held Marcus's pillow and cried, not just for losing him, but for discovering that my sister saw his death as an opportunity. The two losses tangled together, a double grief that left me gasping for breath. Sarah came over the next morning, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a fierce hug. What did she do? She asked. Somehow she knew. I told her everything. The documents, the phone calls, the attempted theft disguised as help. Sarah's face grew darker with every word. That bitch, she said finally. That absolute bitch. You know what? You're staying with Tom and me for a few days. Pack a bag. We're getting you out of here while you figure out next steps. As I packed, I found more evidence of Rachel's scheming. She'd gone through Marcus's desk, his files, even our bedroom closet. Business cards from realtors were tucked into drawers. She'd written "sell" on a photo of our house. In Marcus's home office, she'd left a laptop open to Zillow listings for our neighborhood. The violation of it, pawing through our private life while I was destroyed by grief, made me physically ill. The meeting with Harold confirmed my worst fears and revealed new ones. Marcus's life insurance was substantial. He'd always been overly cautious about providing for me. There were also investment accounts, his 401k, and his partnership stake in the firm. All told, it was more than I'd realized. Marcus was very specific in his instructions, Harold said. Everything goes to you, with very clear language that excludes other family members from making claims. He paused, choosing his words carefully. He also left a letter, to be opened in the event of his death. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Marcus's familiar handwriting blurred through tears. My darling Vic, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened and I'm not there to protect you. Please know that everything I've built was for us. For you. Trust Harold, trust our friends, but be careful who else you let close during this time. People might try to take advantage of your generous heart. Don't let them. You're stronger than you know. All my love. Always. Miss. It was like he'd known. Somehow, he'd known. Harold cleared his throat gently. There's more, Jenny. Your sister has been busy. She's contacted several real estate agents about listing your house, claiming to be acting as your agent. She's also been to 3 banks, trying to access accounts. Fortunately, she lacks the proper documentation. But, he trailed off, the implication clear. She'd been trying to steal from me before Marcus was even buried. What do I do? I asked. Harold's expression was kind but firm. You protect yourself. Change all passwords, put fraud alerts on all accounts, and document everything. If she continues, we may need to consider legal action. Legal action. Against my own sister. The little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, who I'd comforted after our parents died, who'd been my maid of honor. Now I might need a restraining order against her. I stayed with Sarah and Tom for a week, trying to process the dual loss, my husband and my sister, both gone in different ways. During that time, Rachel's behavior escalated. She called constantly, leaving messages that swung between syrupy concern and vicious anger. I'm worried about you, Vicky. You're not acting like yourself. Then an hour later, you're being selfish. Mom and Dad would be ashamed of how you're treating me. She showed up at my house when she thought I'd be there, let herself in with the spare key I'd forgotten she had. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, called to alert me. That sister of yours is in your driveway with a moving truck, she said. Said you asked her to pack up some things for donation. Didn't sound right to me. I called the police and raced over, finding Rachel directing 2 men to load Marcus's office furniture. Oh good, you're here, she said brightly, when she saw me. I thought we'd get started on clearing out the painful reminders. The police made her leave, but not before she caused a scene that had the entire neighborhood watching. I'm trying to help her, she screamed, as they escorted her off the property. She's having a breakdown. Look at her. She's not capable of making decisions. I stood in my driveway, surrounded by the furniture she'd been stealing. While my neighbors witnessed my family drama, Mrs. Chen put her hand on my shoulder. That one's been trouble since you were kids, she said quietly. Your Marcus never trusted her. Said she had sticky fingers and a slippery conscience. Even my elderly neighbor had seen what I'd been blind to. That night, I changed all the locks and installed security cameras. The locksmith, seeing my red eyes and shaking hands, gave me a discount. Lost someone? He asked gently. My husband, I said. And apparently my sister too. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Maybe to everyone else, it did. 3 weeks after Marcus's death, I returned to work part-time. I needed the distraction, the reminder that I was more than just a widow, more than Rachel's target. My colleagues wrapped me in support, checking on me between patients, making sure I ate lunch. It was during a break that I got a call from our insurance company. Mrs. Parker, I'm calling about the claim on your husband's policy, the agent said. We need to verify some information. You recently submitted a change of beneficiary form? My blood ran cold. I haven't submitted anything. I said, my husband just died. Why would I change beneficiaries after his death? There was a pause. I see. Ma'am, I think we need to escalate this to our fraud department. Someone has attempted to file a claim and change the beneficiary to a Rachel Morrison. My maiden name. She'd used my maiden name. The fraud investigation revealed the depth of Rachel's planning. She'd been collecting my personal information for months. Social security number, account numbers, even forged signatures. The investigator, a kind woman named Diane, walked me through the evidence. This is unfortunately common, she said. Family members who see an inheritance as their windfall. Your sister was quite sophisticated in her approach. If you hadn't been alert, she might have succeeded. The word sophisticated made me laugh bitterly. Rachel, who'd never held a job for more than 6 months, who'd borrowed money she never repaid, had put more effort into stealing from me than she'd ever put into her own life. The investigator recommended I check my credit report. When I did, I found she'd applied for credit cards in my name, tried to add herself to my bank accounts, even attempted to refinance my house, all while I was planning my husband's funeral. The confrontation came a month after Marcus's death. Rachel had been calling our extended family, spinning a tale of how I'd lost my mind with grief and cut her off for trying to help. My cousin Elena called me, concerned. She says you're having a breakdown, that you accused her of trying to steal from you. Jenny, is everything okay? I sent Elena copies of the police report, the fraud investigations, the forged documents. The phone was silent for a long moment. Oh my God, Elena breathed. She's really that desperate? That's when I learned Rachel had been making the rounds, asking family members for money, claiming she needed it to help take care of me. She'd collected several $1,000s from various relatives, all in my name. The family was furious, not at me, but at her. One by one, they called to apologize for believing her, to offer real support. Aunt Linda was particularly enraged. That little snake, she spat. Using your grief as a con game, your parents would be spinning in their graves. The family decided to confront Rachel together, an intervention of sorts. We met at Elena's house on a Sunday afternoon. Me, Elena, Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, and 3 cousins. Rachel arrived late, dressed in black like she was still in mourning, clutching tissues she never actually used. Thank you all for coming, she said, as if she'd called the meeting. I'm so worried about Jenny. This paranoia, these accusations, it's not like her. I let her perform for a few minutes, watching our family's faces grow increasingly disgusted. Finally, Aunt Linda slammed her hand on the table. Enough, she said. We know what you've been doing, Rachel. All of it. Rachel's face cycled through emotions. Confusion, innocence, indignation. I don't know what she's told you, but she didn't tell us anything, Uncle Robert interrupted. The police reports told us. The fraud investigators told us. The forged documents told us. I pulled out a folder, thick with evidence. Would you like to explain the power of attorney forms? The insurance fraud? The credit cards in my name? For the first time in my life, I saw real fear in Rachel's eyes. You don't understand, she said, her voice shifting to desperation. I've had such a hard time. Lost another job. My boyfriend left. I'm about to be evicted. And there's Jenny with her perfect life, her rich husband, that big house. It's not fair. Why does she get everything? The mask had finally slipped completely. So you thought you'd steal it? Elena asked, her voice ice cold. While she was grieving? What kind of person does that? Rachel turned to me, tears finally flowing. Real ones this time. Vicky, please. We're sisters. Remember when Mom and Dad died? You promised you'd always take care of me. The manipulation was breathtaking. I did take care of you, I said quietly. I paid for your college that you dropped out of. I gave you money every time you asked. I let you live with us twice when you had nowhere to go. But it was never enough, was it? You have so much, she screamed. That house is worth a fortune. The insurance money. His investments. You don't need all of it. I'm your sister. I deserve half. There it was. The truth finally. In her mind, my husband's death meant she deserved half of everything we built together. Uncle Robert stood up. You deserve nothing, he said firmly. And if you come near Jenny again, if you make one more attempt to steal from her, we'll make sure you're prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Rachel looked around the room, seeing no sympathy in any face. You're all choosing her over me, she said. Just like always. Perfect Jenny, who everyone loves. We're choosing right over wrong, Aunt Linda said. Something you apparently never learned. Rachel stood up, knocking her chair over. Fine. But when she's all alone in that big house, crying over her dead husband, don't say I didn't try to help. Family is supposed to share. That's what family does. I found my voice then, strong and clear. No, Rachel. Family is supposed to support each other in times of grief. Family is supposed to protect each other, not prey on each other. Family doesn't see death as a financial opportunity. You want to know why Marcus never trusted you? Because he saw what I refused to see. You're not family. You're a vulture who happened to share my DNA. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. You'll regret this, she said. When you realize how alone you are, you'll come crawling back. No, I said. I won't. I have real family. The people in this room. My friends who've held me up. The colleagues who've supported me. The neighbors who called the police when you tried to rob me. That's my family. You're just someone I used to know. She left then, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. We sat in silence for a moment before Aunt Linda reached over and took my hand. I'm proud of you, she said. Your parents would be too. Sometimes the hardest thing is seeing people for who they really are, not who we want them to be. Elena poured wine for everyone, even though it was barely afternoon. To Marcus, she said, raising her glass. Who protected Jenny even after he was gone? We drank, and I cried. But for the first time since his death, they weren't just tears of grief. They were tears of relief, of clarity, of finally understanding that I could survive this. Both losses. All of it. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Rachel tried everything. Social media campaigns painting me as the villain, letters to my employer claiming I was mentally unstable, even showing up at Marcus's firm to demand her share of his partnership stake. Each attempt backfired spectacularly. My employer, who'd watched me work through unimaginable grief with professionalism, filed a harassment complaint. Marcus's partners, who'd known about Rachel's character from office Christmas parties, had security escort her out and banned her from the premises. The social media campaign died when people who actually knew us started sharing the truth. My friend Sarah was particularly fierce in my defense, posting, "Imagine trying to steal from your sister while she's planning her husband's funeral. Then imagine being surprised when people call you a monster." 3 months after Marcus's death, I finally felt strong enough to go through his things properly. In his desk drawer, I found a file labeled "Just in Case." Inside were detailed instructions about every account, every investment, every insurance policy. But there was also a section titled "Protecting Vic." He documented every concerning interaction with Rachel over the years, money borrowed, but never repaid, lies told at family gatherings, her strange questions about our finances. The final entry was dated just a week before his death. Our asking about life insurance again, made joke about being backup beneficiary. Didn't laugh when I said that would never happen. Worried about V's blind spot regarding her sister. Need to talk to her again about setting boundaries. He'd been trying to protect me, and I hadn't listened. Now I had to protect myself. I hired a lawyer and filed for a restraining order. The evidence was overwhelming. The fraud attempts, the harassment, the attempted theft. Rachel didn't show up for the hearing, but sent a letter calling me heartless and claiming she was the real victim. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Kwan, read the letter aloud, her voice dripping with disdain. Miss Morrison writes that she's being persecuted for trying to help her grieving sister. However, the evidence shows multiple attempts at identity theft, fraud, and harassment. The restraining order is granted. Miss Morrison is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Miss Parker and may not contact her by any means. It was official. My sister was legally banned from my life. I thought I'd feel victorious, but mostly I felt empty. Another loss. To add to the pile, the first anniversary of Marcus's death approached like a storm system, visible from far off, inevitable, terrifying. I took the week off work, unsure how I'd handle it. The night before, unable to spark her, I went through our photo albums. There was our wedding, Marcus's face bright with joy as I laughed at something Sarah had whispered. Our trip to Thailand, him trying durian for the first time, his expression of comic horror. Sunday dinners with friends, quiet moments on the couch, a life fully lived. And there, in some photos, was Rachel. Always on the edges, always with that calculating look I'd chosen not to see. In our wedding photos, she's staring at my ring. At our housewarming, she's taking pictures of the rooms. How had I been so blind? Love, I supposed. The same love that made me trust Marcus completely had made me excuse Rachel endlessly. The day of the anniversary, I visited Marcus's grave alone. I'd chosen a spot under an oak tree, somewhere peaceful, where I could sit and talk to him. I told him about the year, the grief that still ambushed me at unexpected moments, the betrayal that had taught me hard lessons about family, the strength I'd found I didn't know I had. You tried to warn me, I said to the headstone. I should have listened, but I made it through. I protected what we built. I protected myself. The cemetery was quiet, except for birds and distant traffic. I left his favorite flowers, sunflowers, because he said they were happy flowers, and walked back to my car feeling not better, exactly, but more settled. I'd survived the worst year of my life. That evening, my chosen family gathered at my house. Sarah and Tom, Linda and Bill, James and Kevin, Elena and her husband David. We cooked Marcus's famous chicken tikka masala using his recipe, told stories that made us laugh and cry, raised glasses to the man who'd brought us all together. He loved you so much, Linda said, squeezing my hand. The way he looked at you, like you hung the moon. He worried about you too, James added. Made us all promise to take care of you if anything happened. I think he knew you'd need us to stand between you and certain people. We all knew who he meant. The elephant not in the room, Rachel's absence that felt more like a presence. But we didn't dwell on her. This night was for Marcus, for celebrating a life well lived and a love that endured beyond death. 6 months later, life had found a new rhythm. Not normal. I didn't think I'd ever have normal again, but sustainable. I'd return to work full-time, throwing myself into caring for the babies and supporting their families. I'd started grief counseling, learning to carry the loss without letting it crush me. The house felt less empty, though I still reached for Marcus in the morning sometimes, still expected to hear his key in the lock at 6:30. Fitzgerald had adjusted too, though he still waited by the door every evening, tail wagging hopefully. We took care of each other, two grieving souls finding comfort in routine and companionship. Friends checked in regularly, making sure I ate, slept, lived. I was surrounded by love, just not the love I'd lost. Then Rachel resurfaced, not in person, the restraining order held, but through flying monkeys, as my therapist called them. People who did her bidding, knowingly or not. First it was a cousin, twice removed, calling to say Rachel was homeless and desperate. She's your sister, he pleaded. She made mistakes, but family forgives. I explained about the fraud, the theft attempts, the restraining order. He hung up, ashamed. Then it was an old family friend who'd heard Rachel's version of events. Each time, I calmly presented the facts. Most were horrified they'd been manipulated. Some chose to believe her anyway. I learned that was okay. Not everyone deserved the truth if they wouldn't accept it. The calls tapered off as word spread about what she'd really done. Even Rachel's most devoted enablers couldn't excuse attempted identity theft from a grieving widow. A year and a half after Marcus's death, I received a letter forwarded through my lawyer. Rachel had written it, claiming she'd changed, gotten therapy, found religion. She was sorry for any misunderstandings and wanted to reconcile. I've lost everything, she wrote. My family, my reputation, my home. I've been living in my car, working minimum wage, trying to make amends for my actions. I know I hurt you, but you hurt me too by cutting me off. Can't we find forgiveness? Mom and Dad would want us to be sisters again. My therapist and I spent 3 sessions on that letter. The non-apology apology. The manipulation disguised as contrition. The guilt-tripping about our parents. Classic Rachel, even in her supposed redemption. I wrote back through my lawyer, I wish you healing and growth. I do not wish you in my life. Please respect the legal boundaries in place. Short, clear, final. She didn't respect it, of course. The letters kept coming, each more desperate than the last. She was sick and needed help. She was in recovery and making amends. She'd found our parents' graves and left flowers. Didn't that count for something? Each letter went to my lawyer, added to the file in case we needed to extend the restraining order. But something shifted in me as I read them. The anger was fading, replaced by pity. This person who tried to destroy me when I was at my lowest was herself destroyed. Not by me, but by her own choices. Her greed had cost her everything. Family, support, reputation. She'd grabbed for fool's gold and lost real treasure. I didn't forgive her, might never forgive her, but I released the hold she had on my emotions. She was a sad footnote in my story of survival. Nothing more. 2 years after Marcus's death, I sold the house, Not because Rachel had wanted me to, but because I was ready. The memories were beautiful but heavy, and I needed a fresh start. I bought a smaller place closer to work, with a garden Marcus would have loved and a writing nook where I could work on the grief memoir my therapist had suggested. The old house sold quickly to a young couple who reminded me of us 15 years ago, bright-eyed, in love, ready to build a life together. I left them a bottle of champagne and a note. May this house shelter your love as it sheltered ours. Make it yours. Be happy. As I drove away for the last time, I felt Marcus's presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. Approval. Peace. Permission to move forward. The buyer's agent mentioned, offhandedly, that someone had been asking about the sale. A woman claiming to be my sister, wanting to know the price, and if there was any way to contest the sale. I told her to contact your lawyer if she had legal concerns, he said. She seemed agitated. Of course she was. In Rachel's mind, that house was partly hers, the inheritance she'd been cheated out of. The fact that she had no legal or moral claim to it was irrelevant to her. I added extra security to my new home, cameras and an alarm system. Not living in fear, just living in reality. Some people, even family, especially family, could be dangerous when they felt entitled to what wasn't theirs. Year 3 brought unexpected developments. Rachel's ex-boyfriend, one of many, reached out through Facebook. I know this is weird, his message began, but I wanted to apologize. When we were together, Rachel told me terrible things about you. Said you'd stolen her inheritance, left her homeless out of spite. I believed her, even helped her try to access your accounts. I know now it was all lies. She's done this to other people too. There's a pattern. He went on to describe how she'd stolen from him, his family, his friends. How she'd spun tales of persecution while picking pockets. How she'd moved from city to city, leaving destruction in her wake. I wanted you to know you're not alone, he concluded. And to warn you, she's back in Portland. Saw her last week. Be careful. I thanked him for the warning and alerted my lawyer. Sure enough, within a month, the harassment resumed. She'd show up at places she thought I'd be, staying just outside the restraining order distance but making sure I saw her. She'd send messages through fake social media accounts, alternating between threats and pleas for money. She spread rumors in professional circles, trying to damage my reputation at work. Each incident was documented, reported, added to the ever-growing file. My lawyer, Harold, was grim. She's escalating, he said. This kind of obsessive behavior, we need to be prepared for anything. I upgraded my security again, varied my routines, stayed vigilant. It was exhausting, but I refused to let her steal my peace, along with everything else she'd tried to take. The climax came 3.5 years after Marcus's death. I was leaving work late, tired after a difficult shift. The parking garage was mostly empty, my footsteps echoing in the concrete space. I sensed her before I saw her, that prickle of awareness that comes from being hunted. Hello, Jenny, she said, stepping out from behind a pillar. She looked terrible, gaunt, aged beyond her years, clothes shabby and stained. The pretty baby sister was gone, replaced by someone harder, desperate. You need to leave, I said, hand on my phone. You're violating the restraining order. She laughed, a bitter sound. What are you going to do? Call the cops? Have me arrested again? I've lost everything because of you. Everything. You lost everything because of your choices, I said, backing toward my car. I didn't make you try to steal from me. I didn't make you commit fraud. You did that. You have so much, she screamed, advancing on me. That insurance money, the house sale, his pension. I'm your sister, your blood. Half of that should be mine. The entitlement was staggering, even after all this time. It was never yours, I said. It was Marcus's and mine. We built it together. You contributed nothing but pain. I'll make you pay, she snarled. I'll ruin you like you ruined me. You'll do nothing. A voice said from behind her. Tom stepped into view, followed by 2 security guards. We saw you on the cameras, Rachel. Police are on their way. Rachel spun around, trapped. This is family business. No, Sarah said, appearing with Linda. We're Jenny's family. You're just a criminal who shares her DNA. The police arrived quickly, taking Rachel into custody as she screamed about injustice and stolen birthrights. I gave my statement, showed the restraining order, added this incident to the file. The officer, a young woman named Martinez, shook her head. Family disputes are the worst, she said. The entitlement some people feel. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. As they drove Rachel away, I stood in that parking garage surrounded by my real family, the ones who'd shown up, who'd protected me, who'd never once thought my tragedy was their financial opportunity. How did you know? I asked Tom. We take turns, Sarah admitted. Ever since that ex warned you she was back. Someone always makes sure you get to your car safely. I started crying then, overwhelmed by the love and protection I'd taken for granted. This was family. This was what Rachel had never understood, and could never have. The prosecutor offered Rachel a deal: plead guilty to violating the restraining order and attempted assault, serve 6 months, and agree to permanent no contact with extended geographic restrictions. She refused, insisting on a trial where she could tell her side. It backfired spectacularly. The jury saw the evidence of her years-long campaign of harassment, the fraud attempts, the escalating violence. They deliberated for less than an hour, guilty on all counts. The judge, citing the particularly cruel nature of attempting to profit from a family member's grief, sentenced her to 18 months in prison and a permanent restraining order that extended to any future inheritance or estate matters. Morrison, the judge said sternly, your sister owes you nothing. Not money, not forgiveness, not contact. I hope you use this time to reflect on your choices and seek help for your evident issues with entitlement and greed. Rachel's final statement to the court was telling, this isn't over. She stole my life. When I get out, I'll take back what's mine. The judge added another 6 months for the threat. As they led her away, our eyes met for the last time. I searched for any sign of the little girl I'd once protected, but saw only bitter entitlement and rage. Outside the courthouse, Aunt Linda hugged me tight. It's done, she said. You're free. But I knew better. Rachel would serve her time, but she'd never stop believing I'd stolen from her. In her mind, Marcus's death had been her lottery ticket, and I'd selfishly kept the winnings. The restraining order was just paper. Real safety came from vigilance, from community, from accepting that some people, even family, were simply dangerous to know. 4 years after Marcus's death, I stood in my garden planting the sunflowers he'd loved. Life had found its shape again, different than before, scarred, but solid. I'd published my memoir about grief and family betrayal, donating the proceeds to a fund for fraud victims. My work at the hospital continued to give me purpose. I'd even started dating again. Nothing serious, but proof that my heart could still open. Tom and Sarah had named their new daughter Marcus, Marky for short, and I was her godmother. Life moved forward, carrying loss and love in equal measure. The therapy had helped me understand that I couldn't have saved Rachel from herself. Her greed and entitlement were choices, not my responsibility. I'd spent years trying to fill the hole our parents' death had left in her, not realizing she was deliberately keeping it empty to justify taking from others. The prison letters started when Rachel had 6 months left to serve. Not to me, she couldn't contact me directly, but to other family members, full of manipulation and false remorse. She was reformed, she claimed. She'd found clarity. She just wanted to apologize, to make amends. Could they arrange a meeting? Most ignored her, but a few soft-hearted cousins were swayed. She seems different, one told me tentatively. Maybe prison changed her. I smiled sadly. Rachel's been changed before. New job, new man, new city, new religion. It never sticks because the change is always performance, not genuine growth. Protect yourself. Some listened, some didn't. Those who didn't learned hard lessons about second chances and unchanged natures. Rachel was released on a Tuesday. By Thursday, she'd tried to access my new address through a cousin she'd convinced to help. By Saturday, she'd been spotted near my work again. The permanent restraining order meant immediate arrest if she contacted me, but she was testing boundaries, seeing what she could get away with. My lawyer filed for expanded protections, including criminal stalking charges. She's incapable of letting go, Harold said. In her mind, you're the reason her life went wrong. Not her choices, not her actions. You. That kind of thinking doesn't change without intensive intervention, which she refuses. I knew he was right. Rachel would always see me as the sister who selfishly kept her money. The fact that it was never hers was irrelevant to her twisted worldview. 5 years after Marcus's death, almost to the day, Rachel made her final play. She'd been quiet for months, long enough for me to hope she'd finally moved on. Then I got a call from Adult Protective Services. Someone had reported that I was abusing and neglecting my elderly sister who lived with me, stealing her disability payments and medication. The social worker was apologetic but had to investigate. I don't have an elderly sister, I said, confused. I have a younger sister with whom I have no contact due to a permanent restraining order. The social worker's face changed. I see. The report was very detailed, claiming you were her caregiver and had power of attorney. There it was. The power of attorney she'd tried to steal 5 years ago, reimagined with her as the victim. The investigation was quickly closed, but the intent was clear. If she couldn't steal from me, she'd try to destroy my reputation, my career, my life. That's when something shifted in me. For 5 years, I'd been playing defense, reacting to her attacks, living in fear of the next scheme. But Marcus hadn't raised me to be a victim. Our life together had made me stronger than that. I called a meeting with my lawyer, my family, and a private investigator I'd hired. Enough, I said. I'm done letting her control my life through fear. We're going on offense. The investigator had uncovered a pattern. Rachel had done this before in other cities to other people. Ex-boyfriends, elderly employers, anyone she could paint as owing her something. There were police reports, court records, a trail of destruction across 3 states. We compiled everything into a comprehensive file and took it to the FBI. Wire fraud, identity theft across state lines, elder abuse, federal crimes with serious consequences. The federal investigation moved quickly once they saw the pattern. Rachel had been busy during her quiet months, running the same schemes on new victims. An elderly woman in Seattle whose caregiver Rachel had become, slowly draining her accounts. A Portland businessman who'd hired her as an assistant, only to discover corporate credit cards in his name. A grief support group where she'd befriended widows to access their financial information. The FBI arrested her on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week she'd been released from state prison. This time, the charges were federal. This time, there would be no quick release. This time, her victims were united in demanding justice. During the investigation, I met some of Rachel's other victims. We formed an unexpected support group, bonded by the unique experience of being targeted by someone who felt entitled to what we'd earned or inherited. There was Patricia, whose mother Rachel had befriended at a senior center. Robert, whose small business she'd nearly destroyed. Cindy, whose husband's life insurance she'd tried to claim. We shared stories, compared tactics, found healing in understanding we weren't alone and it wasn't our fault. She's like an emotional vampire, Patricia said during one meeting. She finds people in pain and sees opportunity. The thing is, Robert added, she really believes she deserves it. In her mind, we're the criminals for keeping what's hers. It was validating and heartbreaking to see how many lives she'd damaged. The federal trial was different from the state one. This time, Rachel faced real consequences, decades in prison rather than months. This time, her manipulations fell flat against the mountain of evidence. This time, when she took the stand in her own defense, the prosecutor was ready. Morrison, he said, you've claimed that multiple people across multiple states have all conspired to steal from you. Your sister, your employers, the elderly people you befriended. Is that correct? Rachel lifted her chin. They took advantage of my generous nature. I see. And these alleged thefts always happened when these people were vulnerable? After deaths? During illnesses in times of crisis? That's when they showed their true colors. Or is that when you showed yours? The jury saw through her. Guilty on all counts. 25 years federal prison. No possibility of parole for 10. At the sentencing, I gave a victim impact statement. I talked about Marcus, about the grief Rachel had tried to exploit, about the years of fear and harassment. But I also talked about survival, about the family who'd protected me, about refusing to let bitterness poison my life. Rachel is my sister by birth, I concluded, but she chose to be my enemy by action. I've mourned the sister I thought I had, just as I've mourned my husband. The difference is that Marcus was taken from me. Rachel chose to leave. Rachel watched me with dead eyes, no emotion on her face. When given the chance to speak, she said only, "I'll never forgive you for stealing my life." The judge shook his head. "Miss Morrison, no one stole your life. You threw it away, one crime at a time." As they led Rachel away for the last time, I waited to feel something: relief, vindication, sadness. Instead, I felt empty, not the aching emptiness of grief, but the clean emptiness of a finished chapter. She was gone, truly gone this time. Not dead like Marcus, but dead to me in all the ways that mattered. The little sister I'd protected no longer existed, if she ever had. In her place was a stranger who'd seen my greatest tragedy as her golden opportunity. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by my chosen family and fellow survivors, I took my first truly free breath in 5 years. "It's over," Sarah said, squeezing my hand. "It's finally over." But it wasn't quite over. There was one last thing to do. I drove to the cemetery, to Marcus's grave under the oak tree. The sunflowers I'd planted had spread, creating a golden border around his headstone. I sat on the bench Tom had installed for me, the one where I came to talk to him, to feel close to him. "She's gone," I told him. "Really gone this time. 25 years. She can't hurt us anymore." The wind rustled through the oak leaves, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice. "I knew you were stronger than you thought, Vic." I smiled through tears. "I learned from the best," I whispered. "Thank you for trying to protect me, even when I wouldn't listen. Thank you for the friends who became family. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like, so I could recognize what it doesn't." I sat there until sunset, watching the light fade through the leaves, feeling the chapter close. Tomorrow would begin the rest of my life. A life without Marcus, without Rachel, but not without love. Not without family, not without purpose. I'd survived the worst losses imaginable. I'd protected what Marcus and I had built. I'd learned that family isn't about blood, but about who shows up when your world falls apart. And I'd discovered that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let go of someone who sees your pain as their profit. As I walked back to my car, I left a photo at his headstone, me surrounded by our friends at my last birthday, all of us laughing at something Tom had said. "Look," I told him, "look at the family we built. Look what love can do." The drive home was peaceful. My phone buzzed with messages from my support group, my chosen family, colleagues checking in, life waiting for me. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who'd collapsed in a hospital room 5 years ago. That woman had been shattered by loss, betrayed by blood, nearly broken by greed. This woman had scars but also strength. She'd learned that grief could coexist with joy, that betrayal could teach wisdom, that sometimes losing someone was the only way to save yourself. The light turned green. I drove forward into whatever came next, carrying my dead with me. One in love, one in lesson. Both had shaped me. Only one had made me better. 6 months after the federal trial, I was asked to speak at a conference about fraud prevention and victim support. I stood before 200 people and told our story: Marcus's death, Rachel's betrayal, the long journey to justice and healing. The hardest part, I said, wasn't the financial crimes or the harassment. It was accepting that someone I loved was capable of such cruelty. We want to believe family is sacred, that blood bonds can't be broken. But when someone sees your tragedy as their opportunity, when they try to profit from your pain, they've broken that bond themselves. You're not obligated to pretend otherwise. The audience was silent, many nodding with recognition. Afterwards, dozens approached me with their own stories. Sisters who'd stolen inheritances, brothers who'd emptied accounts, children who'd preyed on grieving parents. Each story unique but following the same pattern: trust betrayed when vulnerability was highest. A year later, I started a foundation in Marcus's name, not for fraud victims. Others did that work well, but for healthcare workers dealing with personal loss. Marcus had always admired how I cared for others while struggling to care for myself. The foundation provided counseling, financial planning, and peer support for nurses, doctors, and caregivers navigating their own tragedies. "Even healers need healing," our motto read. It felt right, honoring Marcus by helping the helpers. At the first fundraiser, I told our story again, but this time focusing on the love and support that had saved me. Yes, Rachel had tried to destroy me when I was broken, but Sarah, Tom, Linda, and so many others had held me together until I could heal. That was the real story. Not the betrayal, but the belonging. 3 years after the trial, I got a letter from Rachel through official channels. She was taking college courses in prison, studying psychology. "I'm beginning to understand what I did," she wrote. "The pain I caused, the patterns I repeated. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to become someone else. Someone better. I read it twice, then filed it away. Maybe she meant it. Maybe it was another manipulation. Either way, it didn't matter. Her journey to redemption or continued destruction was hers to walk. I'd already walked mine. I wrote back just once. I hope you find peace. Please don't contact me again. She didn't. Whether she truly changed or simply moved on to new targets, I'll never know. And that's okay. Some stories don't need endings. They just need to end. Today marks 10 years since Marcus died, a decade of life without him, but not without love. I'm remarried now to William, a fellow widower I met at grief counseling. We joke that Marcus and his late wife Ellen probably conspired from beyond to bring us together. They're up there taking credit, William says. When we achieve some new happiness, we honor our ghosts while building our future. The house is full of blended memories. Marcus's cookbook collection next to Ellen's gardening books. Photos of 4 lives that intersected in loss and bloomed in love. We host Sunday dinners for our sprawling chosen family, telling stories that include all our missing pieces. Love doesn't divide when you add more, it multiplies. Rachel remains in federal prison. She'll be eligible for parole in 5 more years, though the prosecutor doubts she'll get it. Too many disciplinary actions, too little genuine remorse. I don't track her progress anymore. That chapter is closed, that book shelved. Occasionally, someone asks if I've forgiven her. I tell them forgiveness isn't the goal, peace is. I've made peace with who she is, with what she did, with the sister I lost long before Marcus died. I've made peace with the family I chose over the family I was given. Some people think that's cold. Those people have never had a loved one try to rob them while they planned a funeral. Boundaries aren't walls built from anger, they're fences built from wisdom. The biggest lesson from all of this: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. When someone sees your pain as their opportunity, they're telling you everything you need to know about their character. When family becomes threat, chosen family becomes salvation. And when loss threatens to drown you, the hands that pull you to shore are your real relatives, regardless of shared DNA. Rachel taught me about betrayal, but she also taught me about loyalty, not hers but theirs. Every friend who stood guard, every relative who chose justice over blood, every stranger who became family, they're the story worth telling. If you're reading this because you've lost someone you love, know that grief is survivable. If you're reading because family has betrayed you, know that DNA doesn't equal destiny. If you're reading because someone you trusted showed their true face when you were vulnerable, know that their choice doesn't define your worth. We don't get to choose what happens to us, but we get to choose how we respond. Choose wisdom over bitterness. Choose real family over blood obligation. Choose to protect yourself without closing your heart. Choose to honor your losses by living fully. And when someone tries to profit from your pain, choose yourself every single time. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if Marcus knew, not about the accident, no one could predict that, but about Rachel, about what she'd do if something happened to him. That letter he left, those warnings he gave, the way he documented her behavior. It's like he was preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Protect yourself, Vic, he'd said so many times. I thought he meant financially. Now I know he meant from her. He saw what love had blinded me to. And even in death, he made sure I'd have what I needed to fight back. That's love. Not just the sunshine and roses, but the umbrella left by the door, because they knew the storm was coming. So here's my message to anyone dealing with family members who see your crisis as their opportunity. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You are not required to fund someone else's life with your tragedy. You are not selfish for protecting what's yours. You are not cold for cutting off those who would harm you. You are not alone. There are others who understand, who've walked this path, who'll stand with you. The family you choose is more powerful than the family you're given. The love you build is stronger than the bonds you're born with. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is to say goodbye and mean it. To those of you watching who've experienced something similar, I see you. I believe you. I stand with you. Share your story in the comments if you feel safe doing so. Tell me where you're watching from. Let's build a community of survivors who refuse to let family betrayal be the end of our story. Subscribe to join others who understand that sometimes losing toxic family is actually finding freedom. And remember, their entitlement to your life, your money, your grief is a lie they tell themselves. The truth is simpler. You owe them nothing, not your inheritance, not your forgiveness, not your future. Those belong to you and the family you choose to share them with. Thank you for letting me share Marcus's and my story. Thank you for witnessing both the love and the loss, the betrayal and the belonging. If this helped even one person recognize Rachel in their life, if it gave one grieving soul permission to protect themselves, then the telling was worth it. Marcus would be proud. He always said, "I was stronger than I knew. It just took losing him to find out he was right." But here's the thing. You're stronger than you know too. You just might not know it yet. And when you discover that strength, when you finally stand up to those who would prey on your pain, you'll find a whole community ready to stand with you. Because that's what real family does. They show up, they stand up, and they never ever see your tragedy as their payday. Until next time, remember, grief is love with nowhere to go, but betrayal is greed with everywhere to go. Guard your grief. It's sacred, but guard against greed even more. It's patient, calculating, and often wears the face of family. Stay strong, stay wise, and always, always choose the family that chooses you back. Not with words, but with actions. Not with demands, but with support. Not when you're thriving, but when you're barely surviving. That's the family worth keeping. Everything else, that's just DNA.